What's going on, internet land? Jeff Coga here, and I want to talk to you about something called Homeowners Association. So, if you own a condo, a townhome, and you're paying into an homeowners association or HOA dues, right, like every single month, then you may want to pay attention to this because I'm going to talk about a story about that literally happened yesterday, where I went to a board meeting and I requested and told them to increase the homeowner association dues, and so pay attention to this. And if you think about or thought about buying a condo or thought about buying a house, I'm sorry, a townhome, and they have an HOA dues, you may want to understand part of what I'm about to tell you. So let me tell you first kind of a story, okay? So let me tell you the story about what happened yesterday. So yesterday was our year-end meeting at our homeowners association. So where my wife and I lives, there's about 200 homes or so that pays into this HOA or the homeowners association every single month, right? And we went to the last meeting of 2018, and it was actually our first meeting that we ever went to. And my wife has owned this home since 2012, and I've been pushing her to go to these meetings, and finally we decided to go this year. So we go, and as we walk into, it's at this elementary school where the meeting is held every single month, and we go there and we sit. We're the only homeowners there of all things. So we sit there. There's some chairs lined up. We sit there, and the meeting starts, and they start going into conversation. If you have never went to these meetings, okay, and you own a home and you pay into a HOA, highly recommend for you to go check it out, okay? And so we're sitting there, and they get into a conversation about the budget of 2019. Okay. Now, if you don't know how an HOA works, let me kind of quickly explain to you how it works, and then from there, I'll tie it into why I requested them to increase our HOA dues, right? Which is kind of interesting as a homeowner to say, hey, by the way, hey, you know what? I would like to pay more money to you guys every single month. All right. So if you don't know how an HOA works, it works like this, okay? Is that if you're part of a community and you're paying this HOA fee every single month, it's because you have what they call common areas, right? Common areas typically could be like a pool. It can be a mailbox that you share with everyone, right? Like there's like a mailbox thing that you share, and or it can be a clubhouse that they have, right? That you can rent out for free with no cost. It can be because they have a playground, and there's in these common areas there's like plants, there's like all kinds of stuff, and the monthly fee that you pay into the HOAs, that's what they use when they say the homeowners association use to cover the cost of those common areas, right? And depending on how your HOA is structured, meaning how your home is structured as well, it's going to vary on what they cover. Like, for example, if you're in a townhome and you have like shared walls, right? Like literally like there's a wall and your neighbor's next door, and then things like that, then you might have a shared roof, so the HOA may cover the actual cost of repairing the roof. They'll also cover the outside as well, like the stucco, the paint and things like that, right? They might cover all of that. So depending on what they cover, your HOA dues can be less than $100 to $100, or it can be 200, 300. Okay. In my case, a condo that I bought back in 2004, right? Our HOA dues was almost close to about $300 or so. Why? Because they covered the roof, they covered the outside, and things like that. Okay. Another place that I lived in, I didn't own it, but I lived in, was a building called 1100 Wilshire, which is in downtown, where their HOA dues, I believe, was about 600, $700 a month. Now, why is that? Because it was a high rise, like a 32 building high rise that we were in, and had like on the 17th floor, they had like a damn great pool and things like that, and they had like a place to work out and things like that, right? So the HOA dues are much higher. Now, when you're paying into this stuff, right? This money, the HOA that you're paying into, goes to a corporation in a sense, okay? And this business, HOA, have to, the funds that go in there are managed by the board members, okay? And the board members are typically, and it has to be most of the time, people who live in the community. and they get voted in, okay, just like an election that they have to hold, okay, and then they give instructions on how the funds needs to be managed, okay. Now you might be wondering, how is that done? Well, the HOA typically hires a third-party company or property management company that will run these board meetings, okay, that happens typically once a month, and they'll run it and they'll give suggestions and ideas on how the funds should be allocated and how the funds should be used to repair this. Even send out violations to people. Why? Because they're not following the rules of the association. In this case, the rules of the associations are in a document called CCNRs, where it states the bylaws of what could and cannot be done. And these bylaws are made typically in a sense to increase the value of the community, okay, and typically to keep like continuity between like aesthetics and stuff like that, and so that people in the community can live without any issues, okay. Like, it would suck if you're part of a community and then suddenly someone paints their home like freaking like this color blue or something like that, right, or pink or something like that, just because they want to, right. Then it would just stick out like a sore thumb. So they'll control like what you can, like, hey, what color you can use, how it looks, and that kind of stuff, right. So this I'm at this board meeting, and they get in a conversation about the 2019 budget, okay, 2019 budget, and they're supposed to review these documents that are about this thick. And the people at the board members, if you're wondering, they don't get paid anything. They don't get paid anything, okay? So they're doing it because they care about the community. So it's like literally an extra job, and you have to literally like review these documents that are this thick, So again, imagine like you have your day job running a company or whatever it is, and then you have to read this kind of stuff. Now, in this, typically, most of this thickness of the document you got to review has the financials. And this is where the problem and issue kind of pops up, right? Which is most individuals don't know how to read a profit and loss statement, okay? Profit and loss statement is a document that you review. If you run a company and stuff like that, you probably have experience running this, or if you're in a high-level management position where you actually get to see the bottom line, top line revenue, cost of goods and services, how much it costs to actually run the company, and then net profits, then you'll have an idea of what that is, the profit and loss, and even the balance sheet, right? Which a balance sheet is literally the assets that the company have, how much cash it has, what kind of investments are they putting the cash into, do they own stocks, do they own real estate, do they own, the investments, right? So those two documents that you got to review, profit and loss and balance sheets, are two different things that the HOA board members that don't get paid anything have to review every single month. And so they're at this meeting, and I'm there with my wife, and my wife being the first time being there, right? They talk about the budget, and they're talking about stuff. So as I'm explaining how it works, okay, and we're the only people there, okay, they start to get into conversation about the 2019 budget, and from the 2019 budgets, they say, hey, did you review it? Yes. Would you like to approve it? And so they say aye, and they say aye, and then they approve it, right? Like if you're ever in a board meeting, that's how it's kind of done. This is, hey, do you approve? And they say aye. And if you get like typically two people to approve it, you say aye, and then they'll approve it. And then they say aye. And then that's when I said, hey, can I ask a question? And so I imposed a question. I said, hey, I said, I have some concerns. And they were just like, well, please tell me. And I said, you said that you are about 90% funded based on your reserve study report. Okay, now if you don't know what a reserve study report is a document that is created by a third-party company who is kind of like audits the association. Okay, so think of it that way, okay? They audit the association on how much money that they should have based on the life cycle of this particular thing that the HOA has to cover. Example, okay? So let's just say your HOA has to cover a roof, okay? A roof of your condo or something like that, right? Because they pay for it. And if they just installed a roof on your condo, then guess what? They should have or start putting money away based on the monthly fees that they collect every single month, right? A percentage of that into a bucket, reallocate that into a bucket to cover the cost of the roof when it goes bad. Okay, meaning that most roofs are 15 years or something like that. So by the year 14 comes, or year 15 comes, when the roof is 100% bad, right? Or you should replace, then they should have that money that the homeowners are paying into to cover that cost, okay? Same thing as if they have like a pool, okay? Then guess what? If you're paying monthly dues into an HOA, right? Then the funds in that HOA have to put aside when the pool has to be like replastered or whatever because it just looks ugly and things like that, or something has to be replaced, right? So this reserve study report, they said that it's about 90% funded, okay? 90% funded, meaning they're not 100%, meaning based on the stuff that's going to go bad in the next, couple years, a half a decade, or whatever it is, right? 90% funded. And so I raised my hand and I asked the question, says, hey, I'm a little bit concerned. And they said, why? And then I said, well, the economy's been pretty good. And I said, my concern is that, hey, we're about 90% funded. And you're saying that in 2019, you're not going to increase the HOA dues. And I said, that's kind of concerning to me. Why? Because, it's a lot easier to increase HOA dues when the economy is good. Right? Economy is good. Now, when the economy is bad, then guess what? People are losing jobs. People are getting laid off, right? People are getting less time on overtime and stuff like that. So less money is coming in. Okay. And not only that, but the news is just like, we're in a recession. We're doing this and that. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, and then you hit them with the boom increase of HOA dues, right? Like even if it can be $15, $20, whatever it is, $5, $10, people are going to get freaked out. Okay. So I said, hey, if cost of services are going up because of inflation, like labor is going up, construction materials going up, everything cost is going up, then why are you not considering increasing the HOA dues now? And you haven't increased it since the time that we've owned the property, since 2012. And why aren't you doing that? And that's what I said, because it's a lot easier for homeowners to pay it now than later on. So I said, hey, you know what? There's two options you can do it. You can increase it just a little bit and then start collecting the money into that, or you can do something called a special assessment where you do a one-time charge to collect more money and to put more money into the actual fund of the HOA to cover the cost that's supposed to go back. Okay, so they said, huh? And then they kind of like wondered and they said, oh, okay. And then I told them why I really believe that, because the reason why is I have experience in that where when I bought my first condo, I was about 21. I was 21 in 2004. Right? The HOA funds were being mismanaged. Okay, it was being mismanaged, and we got hit with the special assessment immediately after I bought it, where I had to cut a check for, I want to say almost close to $4,000, and I was just like, how the hell does the HOA work? So I ended up joining and becoming a board member, the vice president of that HOA, and I started looking at these numbers and start understanding that, oh my gosh, like this association, we're in big trouble. So we had to figure out ways to actually make up the actual gap, right? Because based on the reserve study report, we were about 65% funded. Okay, so think about that for a second, right? Like you have a budget, like your home, and for your housing, for your food, your college, your kids, food expenses, clothes, that kind of stuff, right? And all of your living expenses, you're supposed to have X amount of dollars, but you only have 60% of income coming in next year, right? That you're in a bad place. Okay, so I remember seeing that, and then we had to do some dramatic things to increase the income and revenue coming into the HOA. And many of the conversation we had with other board members is saying, hey, I wish that we were able to increase the HOA dues before the economy became bad. Okay, and so from there, I told them about that story, and they were just like, oh my gosh. And so hopefully they took that and they voted on, and then they're going to increase the HOA dues about like $10 or something like that. Now, for me, $10 or something like that, it's not going to break the bank, and it shouldn't break the bank to any homeowners if it goes up $10. But what it will do in the long run is that it will create a surplus of cash. And this is where I'm going to tie this in, and I'll end it with this, and I'll answer your question, LeVar, on is, do you think HOA dues are good or bad? I think that's what you asked, is this. People in the office, okay, like the board members, okay, just like government, okay, just like the people in Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill, and people that are local level, okay, that they have good intentions, okay? They have good intentions. So you shouldn't shit on people that are running for public service or offices like that, because they have good intentions. The only issue is it boils down to experience that they have plus resourcefulness that they have to see if they can see the future on problems that are right around the corner. Okay, and if they can forecast that and they have the ability to protect the future. Okay, so here's what I mean by this, okay? So at this board meeting, after I discussed this, then they talked about something called surplus and deficit, okay? And if you watch any type of the news, people will talk about this. Oh my gosh, this country is in a deficit, a trade deficit, especially the last, 2 months, right? With Mr. President Trump and stuff like that with China, they'll be like, we're in a trade deficit, right? So you hear these terms all day long about trade deficit, surpluses and stuff like that. So, but the easiest way to think about it is this, is that you have a budget of something that you're supposed to collect, and you have your expenses, okay? Now, if your budget and your expenses are like this, meaning this gap that you have here, that's a surplus, meaning you collected more money than you actually used. Okay? Now, if your money you collect is this and your expense is this, okay, meaning this top portion, that means you're in a deficit, meaning that you're spending more money than you actually physically collect. So at this HOA meeting, they were talking about in 2019, based on their budget, they're going to, because they've cut cost of expenses, brought expenses down, they're going to have a surplus. Okay, surplus. And now this HOA, it's not their first time they had a surplus, okay? And so the property management company that the HOA hires is saying, hey, do you want to run a deficit in 2019? And that's what the CPA suggested. And then the board members are kind of like, oh yeah, sure, why not? Okay, and then I said, hey, I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I said, what's wrong with having a surplus? Right? It's like like a family, right? Think about your household, right? You're supposed to make this much every single year, okay, from your job that you work. Your expenses is this much, and if you have this, that means you have what? Discretionary income or surplus of cash that you can what? Invest in, hold on it for a rainy day, that kind of stuff, right? But sometimes if you're running a business, right, or running an HOA, a CPA will say, hey, you should run a deficit. Why? Because of taxes. A lot of times because of taxes. Because if you have that, then that surplus gets taxed in a corporation. Now, if you're at a personal level and you have a surplus, that surplus doesn't really get taxed unless that surplus comes from like an investment you made or something like that, right? So they were talking about that. And I said, hey, you guys are 90% funded. Why do you want to run a deficit on that? Okay, and the last time they had a surplus, this is what the HOA did. The HOA literally waived 2 months of HOA dues. Okay, so they waived it. Okay, they waived it. And so I look at my wife and I said, do you remember what year that was when they actually waived it? She's like, I don't really remember. Okay, and this is what I mean by this is what happens in Capitol Hills in our government, our local level, and even in a HOA, right? Where people have good intentions, so they waive it. They're like, oh yeah, we have a surplus of money, so hey, you know what, people, you don't need to pay into this HOA. Hey, you know what, we'll just waive 2 months of you of HOA dues, and then they use that surplus, right, to run the HOA, and then versus what they could have done. What they could have done is this, is kept that surplus, right? That extra money that they had and then reinvested into something for the future. For example, okay, our community has these wrought iron fence that goes bad. This wrought iron fence goes bad because it's iron. So when sprinklers hit it, they, guess what, deteriorate. Okay, they get brittle and then they break apart. So they have to constantly come in and guess what, weld it. And versus if they had that surplus, guess what? Maybe they could have gone ahead and built a brick wall instead. Yes, it would cost you more, okay? But aesthetically, it'll look better, okay? And then on top of that, you don't have to maintain it constantly by actually welding the places that look bad and stuff like that, okay? So those are some of the things that you have to think about. And again, I'm not trying to shit on the people in the HOA board members because I think they're doing a great job. But the thing about it is that, again, it boils down to if you're running that, most individuals are not used to looking at big numbers and then not used to thinking about other ways to figure out where there's a leaky money. And I'll talk about this leaky money and I'll answer that question, is HOA is good, okay? HOAs, when you pay into it, some people can't afford that HOA or they'll fall behind on that. So when they fall behind on the HOA dues, then they're in quote unquote default. Okay, our community has about 200 homes. So I'm at this board meeting and I'm just like, oh, okay. So, in a good economy, that's fine. Hey, HOA dues, people should be able to pay it. But what happens when in a bad economy? Guess what? People stop paying their HOAs. So I said, hey, what is the percentage of the 200 homes that are in there? What percentage of it are in default right now? And then they go like this. They look at each other, right? All the board members. And they were just like, we don't know. And that to me was concerning, right? That you don't know the percentage of the homes that are in the 200 homes, how many of those homeowners are actually behind on their HOA dues. And not only behind on their HOA dues, but I believe because they don't know the percentage, they don't know how to collect on that amount that's due. All right, because they were just like, oh, this person's behind. What do you want to do? Do you want to take them to small claims, or do you want to actually start a foreclosure process? Right, that's what they're saying, and they're voted on small claims. Okay, why? And here's the reason why. I'll say why they were trying to take the homeowners to small claims is because of the cost. Okay, because of the cost. I know because I was part of the board members, right? Versus if you're in a good economy, sometimes the best thing to do is guess what? Just start the foreclosure process. Why? Okay? Why is because it's just going to help you out even more to collect more funds from that. Okay? And that's what I got. Now, the question is HOAs good or bad? Okay? And the short answer I'll give you is this, is that it's good to a certain extent. It is good to a certain extent, especially if you're in the right community. Now, if it's properly mismanaged, then it's terrible, in my opinion. All right. And this is the reason why I tell individuals, anyone who buys a condo or something like that, or townhome, is to get involved in the community to understand, because not only will it help you understand how the funds are being managed, but also it will give you insights on if you should sell your home and get out of the community because the real estate market is tanking or not. Like, think about this. If you're at the board meeting and the percentage of delinquency of HOA starts creeping up, ooh, you better bet you may want to exit out of this because the real estate market might be tanking. In my case, when I was at the board member back in the days, right, as the market was turning, I was still part of it, while the president and the treasurer and stuff like that, they sold their place. After they fixed it up, I stayed there, and guess what happened? Market tanked, and I lost my condo. So that's what I got for you. I got to hop on a different meeting. Hopefully you got value out of it. If you did, let me know in the comment box. Thank you so much. Love you guys. Take care and bye-bye.